When the Nazis came to power in 1933, they bent all of German society to their will. This took the form not just of the political power they wielded and the fascist rhetoric they spouted, but through their very apprehension of the arts themselves. In the avant-garde and modern art that dominated the previous period, from the likes of the Romantics, Realists, and Impressionists, they saw not art, but degeneracy, that they condemned as stemming from Jewish and communist influence. And so in shaping their own hegemonic vision of strength and morality in regards to art, they looked to the Greco-Romans' past, revived phantoms for clarity. We see this in the art, sculptures, and architecture of fascist Germany and even Italy alike, from the palace of Italian civilization, of the Roman Empire's antiquity, to the aesthetic qualities of the Olympics in Berlin in 1936. In these works, we see an art form whose exteriors were molded after the Greco-Roman ideal, that embodied the same interracial beliefs these civilizations were built upon. The male body serves as a recurring focal point, displayed in idealized form and perfectionism. In these ancient kingdoms, the Nazis saw their ancestry, and so their style of revived classicism became the perfect breeding ground for a new propaganda, led by the likes of Goebbels and Speer. But it wasn't the first time classicism had been revived for political means. For that, we must look to its first encore, Neoclassicism, an art style proliferated by the world's most famous propaganda portraitist, Jacques-Louis David. His works practically birthed the neoclassic movement into existence, concerned with warm lighting, simple yet striking, easy-to-read scenes, and depictions of classical Greek and Roman parables that emphasize masculinity, patriarchal power, and defiance of the gods. We see the seeds of his abilities no more potently than in this painting, Oath of the Horatii, a piece that can teach us much about the ideals of Roman and Greek civilization that find themselves celebrated in the works that held the Nazi society to monumentally terrifying heights. The canvas features bold colors, flat, two-dimensional backgrounds, and a theatrical staging of the subjects laid out in passionate, easily readable posing. They're frozen in place like a frieze, enhancing its immediate legibility. We're given access to the story contained within this canvas at the moment of its greatest narrative consequence. The men, depicted dedicated to loyalty and patriotism, strength, honor, and self-sacrifice, are depicted with angular geometry, outstretched limbs and rigid bodies, stable forms, whereas the women, dedicated to passion and feeling, are depicted with soft, curling bodies, lost in flowy, draping robes, curves, displayed as soft and meek. This painting is in essence a call for masculinity, patriotism, and submission to the state. In the midst of warring times, these men reject the forms of docility seen in the weak female members of their society. Instead, they embrace lessons on power and domination, preparing to face enemies that wish above all else to destroy their Roman way of life. You could see what a fascist would find appealing in this. David was born in Paris to a prosperous French family, taking lessons at the University of Paris and eventually learning under the tutelage of François Boucher. He's best known for his theatrical allegorical paintings, depicting classic Greek and Roman myths. As the French Revolution waned and Napoleon came to power, he'd be stylized as the first painter of the imperial court, and he did a lot for crafting the image we imagine Bonaparte as today. From his triumphant crossing of the Alps to his coronation as emperor in Notre Dame, his artistic capabilities imbue a sense of grandeur and importance into his subjects. In this case, subjects who wielded an absolute power over their people that can't be understated. Oath was painted in an earlier time, however, under the reign of King Louis XVI and the troubles the impending revolution would bring. It was commissioned by the king's assistant to be an allegory about loyalty to the state and therefore to the king, during the perilous times of waning loyalty and reduced faith in the monarchy. David does this by extolling the virtues of masculinity through the depiction of the male form. It's a painting that champions self-sacrifice over weakness, political service over personal motives. But if King Louis looked at this and saw submission to a king, he was almost certainly mistaken. After all, the proliferation of the neoclassical movement was in part a reaction to the dominant Rococo style of the period, whose decorative ornamentation and flamboyant excess extolled the virtues and splendor of the noble ruling class. Oath rejects that fragility, whose depiction crops up in some of the women. for a masculinity capable of saving a nation. We can draw comparisons to the way the Nazis viewed the degenerate art that they replaced. In Munich 1937, they unveiled the Degenerate Art Exhibition, presenting 650 works of art confiscated from German museums that they saw as inferior and anti-German. These exhibitions were set up for people to mock and make fun of the art. This was in stark contrast to the Great German Art Exhibition, held just across the street, whose traditional painted and sculpted works were foundational in reinforcing the virtues of the Nazi Party and Hitler's views on German life, family, home, and church. These theories surrounding degeneracy were first explored in Zionist Max Nordau's 1892 book, Degeneration, who theorized that the modern art movement was born of a disease, artists corrupted by modern life who lacked the ability to make coherent works, which he saw as a great danger to the fabric of European culture and society. These concepts were easily seized by the Nazis, who contrasted the bold, ambiguous, impressionistic work of marginalized artists with their own propaganda. We see in their work a reliance on similar aspects that classical and neoclassical art did. Through easily readable forms and simplistic messaging, the ancient past is left unshakable. What was once etched in friezes or ruins of the Colosseum become reanimated in German art. Its narrative style and focus becomes the perfect vehicle to spread the fascist beliefs of an entire nation. Viewing a work like Oath with this reframing transforms its theatrical simplicity from its greatest virtue into its greatest horror. But this frieze isn't just theatrical for the sake of being theatrical. It depicts the story of the Horatii, a 7th century BC Roman legend. In it, the warring city-states of Rome and Alba Longa, rather than commit to an all-out formal war that would cause great bloodshed and loss for both parties, instead elect to choose 3 brothers from each city to battle each other, the Horatii from Rome and the Curatii from Alba Longa. In Oath, the Roman Horatii brothers salute their father, who holds their swords in his hands. As the story goes, only one will survive the encounter, outwitting the 3 Curatii brothers by forcing them to split up and killing them off one by one. In the corner, we can make out one of the weeping women as a sister to the Horatii, who is simultaneously engaged to one of the Curatii brothers. No matter who survives the altercation, she will lose someone she loves. This compounds the level of grief we witness in her depiction and the pain of the other women cast aside. In David's case, Oath is analogous to the growing attitudes of the revolutionary France it was born in. It is a political call for a return to classical men, warriors over the pompous rulers of France's late aristocracy. The revolution in France birthed a new kind of nationalism, where the calls for liberty, equality, and fraternity were soon used as justification for French expansionism and military campaigns, the right to spread their ideals across the whole of Europe. It's these same forces that occupied the attitudes of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, who saw the importance in crafting an image of strength and purpose through art that was aligned with Roman and Greek depictions of masculinity and self-sacrifice for a nation. It's through the works they exalted and the works they deplored that we're given understanding to how propagandic control of the arts manifests in a society desperately clinging on to power, and their crafted picture of German superiority is one that through monumental, narrative-driven art could impose its will over everyone. All the art we consume is inherently political, containing within them the stories that sketch out not an objective view of history, but a fragmented one, pieced together by both an artist with their own personal motives and viewers intent on preserving the components of antiquity that speak to them. In Oath, we bear witness to history on 3 axes: the pride of ancient Rome, the warring revolution of 18th century France, and the seeds that would birth fascist regimes in Germany and Italy. We're made to come to terms with the fact that propaganda can indeed take on beautiful forms. In the idealized lighting, color, and staging, David's work celebrates a kind of militarism, nationalism, and hypermasculinity, one that he saw as crucial in unseating the power at the hands of the French aristocracy. With our modern perspective, it also holds a monumental omen about the way that stories occupy space in our minds, about how control over the arts transforms the narratives we see as important, the very ideals we place value in. When the fascists come for art, they come for the tools that shape our very existence, the language through which we communicate the experience of being human. To give up those is to backslide into our own destruction. The story of Oath ends even more tragically. The surviving Horatii brother, witnessing his sister distraught by the death of her husband, kills her for weeping over the enemy, a weakness that has no place in the new Rome they hope to build out of the ashes of this victory. 9 years after this painting's completion, King Louis XVI would be executed, marking a pivotal turning point in the French Revolution. 2 years after the degenerate exhibition, the Nazis would invade Poland, setting into motion the horrifying events of the Holocaust, a synthesis of absolute evil that still manifests in the terrors that consume our world today. Here, we bear witness to art's ability to contain all the compounding narratives that stretch across time and space, from the ancient history it was based on, to the period it was painted, to the echoes of the future that would soon find comfort here. We're beholden to a staggering depiction of patriotism that is equal parts striking and terrifying, reminded what the term classical truly means. For many, it's a call back for a return to simpler times, when men were men and fought and died for their country, and we were all the more stronger. But when that veneer is pulled back, we see just how effectively fascism grows from the seeds of that message, contained in brushstrokes whose weight of political consequence is rendered unmistakable. Mind Theater is a solo effort produced and written by me, Aoakingbade. For only $3 a month, you could support the show on Patreon. It really helps a lot. The link is in the description box below. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.